These are the 1.3a notes covering lines. Our essential question is, how do I find the slope and right equations of lines? We have done slope and equations of lines before, so this should be a bit of a review. So for problem number 1, this is all about how to find the slope. So for the slope, you need our slope formula. Our slope formula is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So similar to the distance and midpoint formulas, you have your x1s, y1s, x2s, y2s. So it's important that the first thing we do is label. So x1 and y1, x2 and y2. Then we set it up, making sure that everything is in the correct place. -7 minus -5. And -4 minus 2. Notice the double negative that's happening at the top here. So you can take that and turn it into a positive. And then just add or subtract. So -7 plus 5 is -2. -4 minus 2, -6. The negatives can actually cancel out there. And then I reduce the fraction to 6 to make 1/3. And when I have a slope of 1/3, I know it means I go up 1 and over 3. Up 1 and over 3. So it kind of gets me a slope that looks something like this. Uphill and not too steep. For problem number 2, same thing, x1, y1, x2, y2. I'll give you a moment, see if you can set up the equation and start simplifying some things out. Then something strange happens at the end of this that we'll talk about. So I end up with 12 over 0. And mathematically, you are not allowed to divide by 0. So if you take your calculator and do 12 divided by 0, you will get an error message, most likely. It'll say something about error, can't divide by 0. So in our slope, what we're going to write is undefined. And a slope that is undefined is a vertical line. Vertical line straight up and down. Okay, for the next part, we are actually given the graph. So we're going to think about rise over run when we worry about our slope. So any of these points are going to work if you're counting from one to the other. So from this point here, I'm going to go up 2 and over 2. So my slope would be 2 over 2, which you're going to want to simplify to just 1. And if you notice, if you just go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, you do get that same slope. For the next one, you have a flat line, a horizontal line. So if you rise, you don't actually rise at all to count from this point to this one. So rise 0, and then I go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, 0 divided by 5 is 0. So anytime you have a flat line, a horizontal line, that's always going to be a slope of 0. Now we move on to writing the equation of the line. So when we write the equation of the line, we're going to write it in slope-intercept form. It's going to look like y equals mx plus b. We know that our m is our slope and b is our y-intercept. Okay, so for first example, I'm looking for my y-intercept, which is going to be right here. It has to be on my y line as opposed to my x line, x-axis. So my y-intercept is going to be 2, positive 2. Now I just have to find my slope. So to find my slope, I'm going to go from my y-intercept. I'm going to think, how far did I go up? 1, 2, 3, up 3, over 1, Make sure you put the x there, and then you can simplify that out to just y equals 3x plus 2. You don't need the 1, but you are more than welcome to keep the 1 if that feels good for you. Try example 4 on your own. See if you can identify the y-axis intercept, and then count to that next dot and see if you can write the slope. I'll give you just a few seconds. So for this one, our slope is -1/2. In order to get from one point to the other, I have to go down 1 and then over 2. So -1/2. Put the x on, and then the y-intercept is -3, -3. Okay, on the other side of your paper, we have a different form called point-slope form. Point-slope form is written as y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. This first letter y is just going to stay as the letter y. We're never going to plug anything in for that. Same thing for this x right here. It's always going to stay in x. The other three places, the y1, the m, and the x1, those are where the numbers are going to go. Let's look at example 5. Write the equation of the line that passes through the point 3, -1, and has a slope of 2. So notice the phrasing, point, slope. So we're definitely going to use the point-slope form. As always, this is our x1 and y1, and our slope is going to go in for our m. Then we just plug the numbers into the right place. Always keep that first y as a y, minus y1, -1, equals my slope of 2, x minus 3. From there, you're going to simplify and eventually try to solve for y. So that double negative becomes a positive. I'm going to distribute my 2. Y plus 1 equals 2x minus 6. Solve for y by just subtracting 1. So you get a final answer of y equals 2x minus 7. All right, the next one, example number 6, contains a fraction. So make sure you have your calculator handy, either the one on your phone or the one on your Chromebook. So we're going to set this up a similar way. You've got your slope, m. You've got your x1 and your y1. And we're just going to plug it in. Take a second and see if you can plug at least the numbers into the right place first. You should have something like that. The double negatives will turn positive. And then I'm going to distribute. And this is where things can get a little bit confusing if you don't have your calculator handy. We're going to multiply 3/4 times x. That's just 3/4 x. Nothing fancy there. However, when I multiply my 3/4 times 7, that's when I'm going to want to use my calculator. So in your calculator, 3 divided by 4 times 7. You get a decimal. I got 5.25. And then I'm going to change that back into a fraction by hitting Math, Enter, Enter. Again, that's Math, Enter, Enter. And that changes into a fraction of 21/4. Then I'm going to subtract the 5. And I'm going to let my calculator do this last step as well. So I'm not going to worry about here trying to get common denominators. I'm just going to take my 21/4, and I'm just going to hit subtract 5. That gets me an answer of 1/4. And then my problem's done. So with the help of your calculator, even the fractions aren't too bad. All right, let's take a look at the next one, example number 7. So for example number 7, I noticed that I don't have the slope anywhere. In fact, they've only given me 2 points to deal with. So my 2 points are going to be labeled as x1, y1, and x2, y2. And if I want to do anything with this, I have to find the slope first. Find the slope first. Because without the slope, I can't do anything else. Then after you find the slope, then do point slope form. All right, so my first step is going to be to find the slope. Very carefully try to plug those numbers into the right place. Find the slope. You do get a whole number answer for this one. Setup looks something like that. Careful of your double negative. Simplify that out to get a slope of -1. Once you have your slope, your next job is to plug that into point slope form. So I'm going to use this since it's already labeled as x1 and y1, as well as this, which is my m. I'm going to plug it back into that same equation that we've been working with the whole time, this right here. Give you guys a second to try that. Try to plug everything in, distribute, and then move the last number over to solve for y. Okay, so I end up getting a final answer of y equals -1x, which most often you'll see people write as just -x. If you want to keep the 1 there, that's okay. And then plus the 2. Y equals -x plus 2. All right. And our last one, example number 8. This looks a lot like the very first problem, one of the first problems we did when we were trying to write the equation. But if you look really closely, you'll notice that the y-intercept looks like it's not exactly on one of the whole numbers. So we're going to have to do this a different way instead of just finding the y-intercept by looking at it. So what we're going to do first is we're going to use these 2 points, and then we're going to find our slope. So a couple ways you can find your slope. You can do it using the formula, m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. But since I already have a graph here, I'm just going to go ahead and count how far it is from one point to the other. So from this point, I went down 1 and over 1, 2, 3. So I believe that my slope is -1/3. You could do the same thing if you did it the long way of working out the entire problem, but you would have to name your points. So just so we are aware, this point would be 4, 6. This point would be 7, 5. And then you could do the slope formula like that if you didn't think about doing it as down 1/3. Now, once I have that, I'm going to use my point. I'm going to use that as my x1 and my y1. And I'm going to use that as my m. You will get the same answer if you chose to do 7, 5 as your x1, y1. I just thought 4, 6 was the first thing I saw, so I'm going to use that. Plug it in. and then use your calculator to help you distribute, multiply, subtract, anything you need to finish that problem. I'll give you a few seconds. Do the best you can. Take advantage of the fact that your calculator does those fractions for you. I'm going to type in 4/3 plus 6. Then math, enter, enter to change it back into a fraction for you. So I get 22/3, which if you type it in your calculator and change it back into a decimal is about 7.3. 7.3 repeating. And if you zoom in right here, you can kind of see that that's about 7.3. You got your 6, then your 7, and your 8, and it's somewhere between the 7 and the 8. So we probably could have guessed close enough. I probably would have guessed 7.5. I'd have been a little off and not gotten an exact answer. But that's how you would do it using your calculator. All right, really nice job. If you have any questions, you can always see me on Fridays or send me an email. Thanks, guys.